and welcome to the June 27th meeting of the Pinehurst Village Council. The first item on our agenda is our invocation by Pastor John Kenyon of Redeemer Church, and it will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. If we will all please stand.
Thank you. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we give you thanks for this opportunity to gather to discuss matters of import to all of us in the village of Pinehurst and beyond. Thank you for the men and women that you've raised up to lead us, to guide us, to protect us, to see and gain a vision of what Pinehurst is and will become in ways that many of us have not and cannot. I pray that you would give them a spirit of unity. I pray that with their diverse interests and backgrounds and experiences and personalities and all the differences they bring would all lead to a better result in all their decisions and all their care. Thank you for the opportunity we have of being here in Pinehurst and the many blessings it brings in so many ways. And we wished that you would be present here among us, protecting the leaders, giving them hearts to be open to the opinions of others and to help navigate the various challenges they face. It's not an easy job, and many times very thankless, and yet we are very thankful for them being willing to do that. Lord, bless this meeting, we pray, in Jesus' name, amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor. I met with Pastor Kenyon some months ago, and we had a wonderful chat. And the pastor is planting a church in our area, so we're very, very glad to have that. So thank you very much. The next item on our agenda, we have reports. First from our manager, Jeff Batten is standing in for Jeff Sanborn, who's having a well-deserved vacation. Jeff?
No reports.
Clark? John Baldry?
Nothing tonight, ma'am.
Claire? John?
Nothing.
And I too have nothing. So we will move right into our consent agenda. All the items under the consent agenda are considered routine and can be enacted under one motion.
I move to approve all the items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion by John Cashin, a second by John Baldry. Is there any discussion?
Yes, I'd like to just remove the May 23rd regular meeting from that. We can approve those later.
We can approve those later? Is there?
Move those. There's a list of things we're consenting to. I want to remove the May 23rd regular meeting minutes.
Okay, we will,
Just amend the,
okay, we will, John, are you willing to amend your motion to remove the May 23rd meeting minutes?
Yes.
And the second?
second.
Okay, we will amend the consent agenda to remove the May 23rd meeting minutes, and we will look at those later. Is there any additional discussion? If not, let's vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you, Lauren. That is unanimous, with the exception of removing the May 23rd meeting minutes. Okay, number 5. Jeff, would you like to take that one?
Leo Santawasa, this is a resolution to consider his appointment to the Planning and Zoning Board as chair and be replacing Fred Engelfeld. So.
And Fred, what are you going to be doing? Yes, you do, or it will sound like nobody's talking. Maybe Bruce can help us.
I remain a board member until, I think, a year from October.
A year from October?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Fred. Okay, we have a resolution to appoint Leo Santawoso as the chairman of our planning board. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve Resolution 17-17, approving Leo Santuosa as the new chairman of the Planning and Zoning Board.
We have a motion by Clark Campbell and a second by Claire Bergren. Is there any further discussion? If not, let's vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Oh, I think Fred voted too. That's okay. Okay, thank you. Lauren, that's unanimous. Number 6, we need a motion to recess our regular meeting and enter into a public hearing.
I move to recess the regular meeting and enter into a public hearing.
We have a motion by John Baldry and a second by John Cashin to recess our meeting and enter into a public hearing. Any discussion? If not, let's vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. Thank you. That's unanimous. Bruce, you look like you're ready.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Mayor, Village Council, members of the audience, I'd like to introduce this public hearing and interject a little bit of discussion relative to the recommendation from the Planning Board. The purpose of this public hearing is to consider an official text amendment to the Pinehurst Development Ordinance, specifically Section 8.6 SR2, Item 4, Dwelling Townhouse Cluster Dwellings, Section 8.6 SR3, Item 1, Dwelling Multifamily, and Section 10.2 Definition. These amendments would require a minimum of 1,500 heated square feet for townhouse cluster developments and multifamily developments, and add the definition of heated square footage. The applicant is John E. Farrell. You have in your staff report the recommendation of, or the actual amendment from Mr. Farrell. At the Planning and Zoning Board, there was discussion relative to that, and the Planning and Zoning Board recommended a modified definition. They did concur, for clarity purposes, that we should measure all dwelling units in the same way by interjecting the heated square footage, but they did propose a modification to the definition, and their recommendation that for the definition of heated square foot would be heated square feet of a dwelling unit is space that is intended for occupancy that is heated by a conventional heating system or systems that are permanently installed. They did also, during that discussion, there was some discussion, and they recommended that the Village Council also direct them to further study the different heated square footage elements for our different dwelling units, such as a multifamily unit versus a single-family home, and whether or not there should be some variation as to that heated square footage. But it was clear from the recommendation that that could be done as a separate issue, and that the definition of heated square footage, as the Village Council shall determine, be applied to all of these districts. That could occur today,
Okay.
and then they could further study that issue and bring some recommendations back to you.
Okay, if I'm hearing you correctly, Bruce, they are recommending that we approve the definition of heated square footage as you discussed, but they further study the 1,500 square foot minimum?
The 1,500 square foot minimum, the differences in the different type of dwelling types that we have, single-family homes, cluster homes, townhomes, multifamily condos, and those sorts of things. As we were looking into it, there were some national averages, some averages to the southeast, and then even some of our own product that's made non-conforming
Right.
by the 1,500 square footage. So that was of a concern to them, and they felt needed separate deliberation, but they did not want to hold up this petition by Mr. Farrell.
Right, okay. Personally, I would support looking at some additional criteria for the minimum square footage. Does any member of the council have anything to say about that?
I think it's a good idea. Excuse me, everybody. And then there was also something in the notes about basements, unfinished basements, and things like that. So clarification on, if something could be considered potentially heated square footage versus from the start it's heated. So I think just understanding what the mix of that could look like would be good.
Certainly.
Any other comments from council?
Well, I think I would just like to be sure it's clear. It's not there's no ambiguity. And if there's consistency across the village so that the standard or the ordinance is clear to all what exactly 1,500 square feet means, and if it's heated square footage, okay, that's good for me too. But again, the driving factor for me is it has to be clear, has to be unambiguous, and the simpler, the better. So if we need to take a moment to think about that or to make sure that it's clear, that's okay with me. I support what Mr. Farrell is proposing. Just wanted to be sure we have it right.
And it's not just the 1,500 square foot. In some of our residential districts, particularly single-family homes, we have a higher standard. 1,500 happens to be the lowest. In some districts, it's 2,000 square feet. In some, it's actually 600 square feet. So what this amendment and what the planning board and I think Mr. Farrell were trying to establish here is we define heated square footage the same, and we define how we regulate the size of dwelling units the same, but the Planning and Zoning Board wanted to further look into those different zoning districts and the different type of housing product and bring back some further recommendations and study.
The way I'm looking at, you can, just a second, and you can speak, okay? I just wanted to make a comment that if we approve this in its entirety, there will never be a townhouse built that is less than 1,500 square feet unless it is as a conditional use district. So we need to make sure, and Bruce, I think we need to make sure that we have the size right.
And I think that's the study that the Planning and Zoning Board would like to take a look at.
Exactly.
And look at the market, look at really what the driving forces are out there and make sure that we're where we need to be.
Right.
But if we did nothing, the lowest minimum square footage right now is 1,500 square feet.
That is, well, if we did nothing, we would still have the dilemma of 1,500 heated square footage with some dwelling products and 1,500 square foot with other dwelling products.
Right, but what the mayor said was if we don't do this, we would have situations where you'd never have a townhouse less than 1,500 square feet. If we do nothing, there still would not be I guess if you had the world's biggest balcony, and that was going to be included in the dimension calculation, but I just want to be clear that the minimum square footage right now in the Village of Pinehurst is 1,500 square feet. And I understand what we're doing, and I'm in favor of it. I don't have one reason to vote against it. I just wanted to point it out that we don't have anything lower than 1,500 square feet right
Except within the R5
Probably, yeah.
zoning district in which 600 square foot is the minimum.
Right.
And the R5 district allows mobile homes?
It does.
Yep. Okay. Mr. Farrell, since you are the applicant, please come forward. I didn't mean to sidestep you, but we needed our staff to talk to us about this. Thank you. It is.
Is it working?
Sounds good to me
Great.
from here.
You were sort of taking this whole thing in a different direction. My intention had nothing to do with reducing the size of dwelling units. It has nothing to do with whether the right size townhome and so forth and so on. That argument's been going on for 40-plus years and litigated in Pinehurst thoroughly, and I'll assume that it's going to be an issue going forward. So let's just get that off the table. This has nothing to do with that, all right? The purpose and objective of this proposed change is simply to bring clarity, consistency, and comparability to the PDO specifications regarding living unit sizes, regardless of the building form, that is single-family, multifamily, and ensure that those plans, when proposed, are evaluated by the village for code compliance using a standard recognized methodology. Kind of a long objective, but I think that sort of makes sense. Okay, what it's not about is exactly what we talked about. It's not about square footage. It is not about whether that's the right square footage or anything like that. It's strictly about consistency in measuring living units between dwelling types. The PDO contains lots of specifications. There's specifications on setbacks, fence height, and so forth. And those are easily understood because they're one-dimensional specifications. Other specifications are not so easily understood, such as probably square footage in the permeable square footage, and for water square footage. Those are complicated formulas, as I understand it, or can be. The other one that's not easily understood necessarily is the size of a dwelling unit. However, the specification for the size of a dwelling unit is critical, that it be well understood, consistent between building types, and that there be a standard methodology used by staff that's well known by builders, developers, and everyone in the public, how it's going to be calculated. So the term heated square foot, I'm sure we all know, is generally used throughout the industry as the recognized way to specify the size of a dwelling unit. I think that would be generally agreed to. We might get an argument here and there, but I think that's probably true. And so therefore, adding the term heated square feet in the reference sections reinforces the fact that the village will treat all living unit calculations the same and use a consistent and accepted methodology and industry standard for the calculation. That simple. As far as the definition goes, I didn't make that up. I mean, that came directly from the North Carolina Real Estate Commission, which is an agency of North Carolina State, and it's their definition used in their document. Their document is the guidelines for calculating living unit sizes. And that document is supposed to be used by most real estate professionals whenever they quote living unit sizes. So I didn't make that up. That's directly from that. I don't have a lot of angst over changing the definition, and I understand some of the issues that you brought forward. I do have a couple concerns, though. One being, it seems that the idea of if a unit has a heated space or a conditioned space that has to be accessed through the outside, to me, that's sort of an accessory building, but I can let that go. The other part, though, is if in fact the village is allowing speculative development and we're issuing building permits and also issuing a certificate of occupancy, and we come to find out that there's a 1,200 square foot, let's say in a 2,000 square foot zone, a 1,200 square foot first floor and an unfinished, but with heating ducts, 800 square foot basement, does that satisfy the requirement? I think we just have to be careful how we're calculating square feet and whether or not it actually meets the code and the standards that North Carolina
Let me
espouses.
interrupt for a moment. Bruce, how would you calculate an 800 square foot unfinished basement that had heating ducts?
As in our districts where we currently regulate heated square footage.
Right.
And probably for the past 20 years, if it's heated and cooled, we consider that to be in the classification as meeting the definition of heated square footage. So under Mr. Farrell's definition, I do not believe that would be included. Under the Planning and Zoning Board's recommendation for those areas that are heated and cooled but may not be completely finished, it would be counted.
Well, it also would not be counted under the standards as documented in the North Carolina Real Estate Commission, nor in the BOMA, B-O-M-A, the Building Owners and Management Association document, which is generally used for multifamily dwellings, 4+ units in a building. That also excludes that type of unfinished space.
And
Jack,
I
I'm sorry, go ahead, Bruce.
I believe in the way the North Carolina appraisers review home size, that sort of thing, those unfinished spaces would not be counted as well. So this would be, as we're defining it, would be specific to our PDO and our land use and zoning, which oftentimes does differ from other state regulations or state codes or manuals.
Yeah, I mean, we can't solve all the problems tonight, but I would, just as an aside, I would recommend that an internal memo be issued by the planning department that describes exactly how it's going to calculate living unit sizes when a plan is submitted, and it also references the documentation and standards that will be used. And I think that would be helpful to developers and so forth. So we're a little bit off subject here, but
Well, we are, but as Bruce has stated, currently, we would be counting that unfinished heated square footage per our PDO. So that's something that we would. Let me just go.
it doesn't say that in the PDO. I mean, there's
Well-
no There's no documentation in the PDO that describes how you're going to calculate.
So where
living
did you
unit.
make this up, Bruce?
It's not made up, Madam Mayor.
didn't
When
think so.
something is not defined in the PDO, it then refers to the North Carolina Building Code and then refers to the Webster's Dictionary as backup definition. So when we say heated square footage, what you get back to is literally what is heated square footage.
Okay. I'm comfortable with the way we're doing it now. That we may move to, your definition, but let me ask, Jack, if you really don't have any axe to grind with the minimum size, why is the 1,500 square feet here in your amendment?
I'm sorry, say that again?
I think you just said that you don't really have any concern over a minimum size of a
I didn't say I didn't
unit.
have any concern. I said that's not the subject matter here.
Then why is the 1,500 square feet here?
Because it's part of this, I didn't change that. I didn't change anything. I just put two words in there, heated, on both lines.
The figure is already 1,500 square feet. What Jack is implying is that we add heated to that same sentence, so it's no longer the question of what is
Okay.
the square footage. It's now heated square footage in those districts or those dwelling types that currently aren't listed as heated square footage.
And I think that the planning board would like to do a little bit more research on the size. Is 1,500 the right size?
Boy,
Yeah, we're not sure.
Yeah, I think to clarify that, the Planning and Zoning Board recognized that was a completely separate issue.
I
But
see.
as this brought it to light, they wanted that included in their recommendation to the village council.
Okay.
I'm real simple. I'm just trying to get some consistency between building types.
I agree. I think that's a good thing, but I think we have to solve the size problem, the minimum size, and probably need to do it all in one.
Probably not tonight, though, right?
Probably not tonight. We do have some other speakers. David Leonard? No? Okay, pass. Kathy Spangler? I'm sorry? This is public hearing number 1. That's okay. That's okay. And then we have John Root. Pass. Okay. Jack, you've just said it all for everybody, apparently.
Yeah,
So,
hope that was satisfactory.
it was. You did a very good job. I'm not sure what council wants to do with this. It seems like the planning board has some additional information they want to give us. And so perhaps we should just delay everything until they have all the information.
Again, that's a separate issue. I think the heated is, inserting the word heated is something we can take care of today.
Yes.
The other issue, if that wants to be studied, like Jack said, it's been studied for 40 years. It'll probably continue to be studied, but if that's going to keep going, that keeps going, but I think we can take care of the resolution today.
Is everyone comfortable with adding the definition for heated square footage? Okay. Let's see if we can do a partial motion.
We don't need to do a partial on this, correct?
And I think you maybe want to close the public hearing.
Right.
Oh, yes, yes, I'm sorry. You're standing up? Now, wait a minute. You cannot be heard. We have a system. Are you speaking about this issue?
Yes, I am.
Oh, did you call,
You're
did I call your
talking
name?
about a motion now, and I didn't realize you would go that far. I thought it was going to be referred to the planning board, but.
That's what I thought too, but.
You're looking at, I'm the one that kind of discovered that the 900 feet was really 748 square feet.
And your name is?
I'm Dave Leonard.
Dave Leonard.
Thank you. The big thing is, heated square footage is one thing. So we have a house, as a matter of fact, with a large basement in it, which is kind of uncommon. But it's a heated basement, heated and cooled. But when the Realtor was listing the property, she made sure that she did not include that as heated square footage. And she said it's not finished. Therefore, if you added the word finished, heated square footage, then I
So
think you would
once
have
you've
clarity.
finished it, would there be a reappraisal of your property?
Good.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you. Okay, what do we want to do as far as I think we do need to amend the motion because we're not talking about, well,
Is the motion just to add the word heated? Is everything else the same?
No, no, ma'am. First of all, there's the recommendation or the amendment from Mr. Farrell for one definition of heated square footage. Then there's the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Board for another definition of heated square footage. So the motion that needs to be made is to interject heated square footage into the Section 8.6 SR24, Section 8.6 SR 3, Section 1, and then what is the chosen definition of the village council for heated square footage?
So,
Sample ordinance, at least a sample ordinance in the agenda package I have, has the heated words inserted and uses the definition of heated as you have described it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
so that is the planning board's recommendation?
Yes, in the motion that you have.
Okay. But we need to leave the 1,500 square foot out.
We still need to step out of the public hearing.
Oh, okay, we had one more person. Let's close the public hearing, and I think I need a motion to close the public hearing and re-enter our regular meeting.
I move to adjourn the public hearing and re-enter the regular meeting.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Campbell, a second by John Baldry. Any discussion? If not, let's vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are now back in our regular meeting, and we can consider, I think, the planning board's definition of heated square footage.
That is currently what's in the drafted motion.
That's currently
in the
what's
ordinance.
right there in the draft, okay. Okay. Does anyone want to move to accept this definition that has been kind of, massaged by the planning board?
Before we do that, in respect to Mr. Leonard's comment about finished, I think if you do that, I think planning and zoning needs to get a hold of that again. I think that's a conversation for P and Z to go back through that process. Not that, not making an opinion one way or the other, I just feel like if you're going to amend it again, which can be done, it needs to go back to P and Z, because that's a discussion for
Do
P
you
and Z.
want the entire amendment to go back to P and Z?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I don't mind Jack's first line in what he read to us tonight is exactly sums it up. It's just consistency in the ordinance. I think this is an oversight. I think it's always been an oversight. I think it became known to us because of the Greens, the apartment complex. That's the
Exactly.
only reason we know about it.
Exactly. Can you make a motion to that effect then, clerk?
I think I can just read what we have in front of us to approve what P and Z has recommended to us, which adds the word heated in two places and adopts their definition. Is that correct?
That is correct.
As it's written. We haven't modified anything here today.
And
In our discussion, I think we've confused each other, but I don't think we've modified anything.
In my suggested motions, there's a minimum of 1,500 heated square
That's
footage.
already in the ordinance. That's in the ordinance already. You see the word heated twice in that paragraph? That word is added, so we're just,
Okay. Are you ready?
I move to approve ordinance 17-09, amending the Pinehurst Development Ordinance to require a minimum of 1,500 heated square feet for townhouse cluster dwellings and multifamily dwellings, and add definition for heated square footage. And I move that the proposed amendments to the Pinehurst Development Ordinance are consistent with the goals outlined in the 2010 Comprehensive Long-Range Plan and are considered reasonable and in the best interest of the public as referenced in the memorandum dated June 22nd, 2017 from Bruce Gould, Principal Planner.
second.
We have a motion by Clark Campbell and a second by Claire Berggren to approve this ordinance 1709. Any additional discussion? I would only say that I believe that the planning board is going to go back and look at minimum square footage for various dwellings.
And I understand that, but
Okay.
we didn't alter that number, that 1,500,
Okay.
we have not touched that. And
That's
they didn't
fine.
discuss it yet, so we can't vote on it today.
Okay, we'll discuss it later. Any other discussion? If not, let's vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, thank you, Jack. All right,
thank you.
all right.
Mayor, just for clarification, did you also, are y'all interested in having P and Z also revisit the finished, unfinished question?
I would like them to revisit the whole thing. I mean, I'm not sure if council I just think that they need to look at the whole the thing in its entirety, and especially the minimum square footage for townhouses and those kinds of dwellings, because 1,500 does seem to be a little large to me.
You know, we ourselves, the four of us and John's predecessor, did the PDO. I mean, we had every right then to do it, and it wasn't an alarming number then.
It was suggested then, but then it went back.
It was what?
It was suggested that it be a smaller number, and when the council looked at it all, it went back to a larger number.
I went to every single one of those meetings, and we didn't get into a deep discussion on that particular issue. But, I mean, if P&Z wants to, I mean, vet it. I mean,
I think that would be a valuable thing for you to do. Does anybody have any problem with them doing that? Okay, then please do that and come back to us with your recommendations. Okay, that takes care of number 9. How about number 10?
I've got that one, Mayor. We've talked about this on several occasions. This is to consider exchanging property, Village Pinehurst property, with Mr. Frank Mazer. The village's property is 0.60 acres in size. It is located directly behind the old fire station on 45 Community Road. Mr. Mazer's property is located behind the Bretton Woods Townhome Development, and his size property is 5.88 acres. According to state law, we just have to make sure that we're receiving fair consideration for the village property. The appraisals have been done, and the village is receiving fair, greater than fair consideration in this land swap. So it's up to council. If you choose to do so, there's a resolution that you would need to adopt that would allow you to execute the documents to facilitate the exchange of property.
Any comments on this land exchange?
I think we've talked about it enough.
I think we did.
I lost my voice.
We did. Okay.
We've talked about it. We haven't talked about it, I don't believe. I missed the last meeting, but I don't know that we've talked about it in public. I don't know if anybody's here to speak about it. If they are, I'd love to hear their comments. I feel like we're doing two good things, and I think it's the land we're getting becomes open space and stays open space. It would not become more housing, if you will, or more development in that area in particular, which, you know, we hear about the traffic concerns as it is already from residents that are come regularly to our meetings. And I looked for Gene, but I didn't see Gene out there because this is right in that area there. And then we're also giving the owner of the firehouse the opportunity possibly to do something with it, with the small amount of land we're giving, which isn't very big. He can expand, I guess, the parking lot to accommodate some sort of, you know, renovation or whatever upfitting he might do to that particular property. So I feel like we're doing two good things. I mean, if anybody's here to speak against it, I'd love to hear that, because I haven't thought of a reason to not do this.
Is there anyone here who would like to speak against it?
Or for it.
Or for it? Leo Santaposo.
Looking at the tax map information, it appears that the larger tract that we're getting from Mr. Mazer is landlocked, does not have any direct road frontage. Is that correct?
That's correct. There is an easement, access easement, that is through resort property in terms of getting off of Diamond Head, but to get the rest of the direction is through resorts property as well, which they have agreed to provide the village an easement should we desire
But
one.
there's no access into roads off of Diamond Head, is there?
The main entrance that comes in off of Diamond Head that comes into Bretton Woods and Colonial Pines is actually owned by the resort, and it has an access easement for all of the properties that are located there, the Bretton Woods property, this property, and the Colonial Pines.
Are there any covenants or anything that would restrict the use of the property in any way?
Not to my
Isn't there access off Trotter Drive?
not directly. There is one parcel that is owned by the county that would actually be slightly between, would be the last parcel between Trotter Drive and Wentworth Circle, which Wentworth Circle is part of Bretton Woods, but actually is within the property boundaries of this particular 5.88 acres.
Wentworth Circle touches Trotter?
It does not.
I think let's say the ease of access is not there. That makes it a prime candidate for open space, in my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you, Leo. Any other comments? Okay, are we ready to consider this as a motion?
I move to approve Resolution 1719, approving the exchange of property owned by the Village of Pinehurst located at 105 Power Plant Road South with property owned by Mr. Frank Mazer located at 2402 Wentworth Circle.
We have a motion by Clark Campbell and a second by John Baldry. Is there any discussion? If not, I'll ask for your vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Thank you, that's unanimous. Okay, next is number 11, and I think, Jeff, you have
I'll
this.
take that one as well. This is for your consideration, opportunity for the village to continue to utilize McGill Associates in fiscal year 2018 for our on-call engineering services. McGill has been doing this since 2008. It's very intimately familiar with our PDO and our engineering standards manual. Have been very responsive with our on-call service needs for things like calling them out to take a quick look at a drainage project or something of that nature that we're not sure how best to handle. They do all of our site plan reviews and other technical advice that the village needs. As you all know, we do not have an engineer on staff, and this is a pretty critical function of the village that we have to provide. So our recommendation would be to continue our relationship with McGill Associates in the next
I
fiscal
agree.
year.
I agree. Okay, are we ready for a motion, or are there any questions?
No questions here. I mean, it's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned, just getting to interact with McGill directly quite often. Very, I couldn't speak highly enough for them, so I'm going to move to approve the contract for on-call engineering services with McGill Associates for fiscal year 2018.
We have a motion by Clark Campbell and a second by John Cashin. Is there any further discussion? If not, let's vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you. Thank you very much. We really,
But if you'd stick around to the end, I got something in other business that you might comment on.
Okay. Thank you. That's unanimous, Lauren. Okay, number 12.
I'll also take this one.
you.
This is an item that we do annually to renew solid waste services in CCNC. When CCNC was annexed into the Village of Pinehurst by a local bill, that local bill stipulated that solid waste services had to be provided by a private contractor. There are two private contractors that are approved to provide services within CCNC, one of which is Lofton Garbage Service. His contract value is about $95,000 a year. That exceeds staff's ability to enter into that contract. So it requires council action, and this would be for fiscal year 2018 to continue his service there. I think he's a third-generation provider in there, but the other provider contract does not exceed the $25,000 threshold by which staff can execute that one.
Thank you, Jeff. And I understand that CCNC is very pleased with the services that they receive from Lofton.
We do not receive any complaints out of CCNC. Not to say that there aren't any, but they don't rise to our level.
Okay, anyone ready for a motion?
I move to approve the contract for solid waste services for CCNC to Lofton Garbage Services for.
Second.
We have a motion by John Cashin and a second by Clark Campbell. Is there any discussion? If not, let's vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you, that's unanimous. Number 13,
I'm going to ask Dave White to come take this one. This is relative to a concessionaire contract for providing concession services during ball games and things of that nature at Cannon Park, but it amounts to a lease of village property. Therefore, it's appropriate that you be involved in it.
thank you. Hello, Dave.
Hello, how you doing? Good. So we recently went out to bid for a concession stand at Cannon Park. After reviewing 2 bids that we received, we would like to recommend the vendor Chubby Cubbies.
Chubby Cubbies?
Yes.
Okay.
They apparently make a pretty good cheesesteak, so.
Cheesesteak. Chubby Cubbies cheesesteak. Okay, got that.
So we'd like to recommend to go into contract with Chubby Cubbies at Cannon Park for the fiscal year 18, starting July 1.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Dave?
Forward.
Very straightforward.
I move to approve the contract with Chubby Cubbies to operate the concession stand at Cannon Park for fiscal year 2018.
We have a motion by Clark Campbell and a second by Claire Berggren. Is there any discussion? If not, let's all vote for Chubby Cubbies.
Aye.
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 Okay, opposed, say no. Okay, that's unanimous, Lauren. Thank you very much, Dave. I'll stop by and see about that cheesesteak sandwich. Okay. All right, now we're down to 14, which is other business. Do any council members have other business?
I've got 2 things. One, I came across a situation in the village, and you guys know you may remember, we have a requirement, and Bruce and the engineer are here, so they could correct me if I'm wrong. We have a requirement in the village that if you're within 300 feet as through the right-of-way of a public sewer, you need to hook up to the Moore County public sewer system. So if you're within 300 feet from your property to the nearest sewer, and it happens to be septic, and there are septic systems still in the village, that you have to hook up to the public sewer. We also have a prohibition in our engineering standards that there are no private utilities allowed in the right-of-way. Well, you can't have both. And there's a situation now I know of where, and they may or may not be able to solve it on site, I don't know, but it just made me think of and I'm not trying to fix that problem at all, I'm not involved, I just heard about it. But it made me think that you can't tell somebody you're within 300 feet and you can't get in our right-of-way, because then you're forced to go get easements across people's private property, which they don't have to give, so where does that leave that person? So we'd either have to make an exception to allow for septic in those particular cases, or allow the use of the right-of-way for private utilities in those instances. They're not going to be an abundance of them, it's going to be a handful. I'm in favor of, and this is just discussion, but I'm in favor of, we solved the women's exchange problem by virtue of going across private property. The resort was kind enough to work with the women's exchange, and going through the DOTs right away. They didn't care one bit that we were taking a private utility down. So I'm not sure, I understand probably the logic behind the current policy and the engineering standards to not want private utilities. You don't want irrigation lines and all different sorts of things. But I think if you limited them to those instances where, if it was, this is a very rare occasion where the sewer line is so low already that the property owner would have to literally go under the road, across the road, in our right-of-way, and pump from their property. So the reason they call it a private utility is because the Moore County doesn't want to have to maintain that particular pipe and system, so you'd maintain it, but you'd have to have the access to that property in case you ever had a problem with it. So that's why otherwise the county would just come trench a new line and add new customers, and they'd love to have a new customer. So I think it's just a topic for, to think about, that you can't have both, because that makes a property almost uninhabitable.
Right,
So-
I can understand. Is there a way to craft an amendment that?
Bruce is going to, looks like.
Okay,
comment.
Bruce is going to craft.
As
an
part of that
amendment.
requirement, there's also language in there that if it's topographically unfeasible to tie in, so I'm not familiar with this situation, Clark, but I can tell you around Short Road in that area, there were 2 individuals that pulled building permits under the assumption that they were on public utilities, only to find out they had septic tanks later. And both of those households have been approved due to the shallowness of the manhole and the inability to extend the public line to put septic tanks in. So there already is some language where for topographical reasons, such as the manhole's too shallow to further extend the public utility for staff, the PDO, in that case has provisions that would allow for septic tanks either to be replaced or for that dwelling to have a new dwelling have a septic tank installed
And that's good if you got enough land. A lot of times a septic will take a place you couldn't put a carriage house, you couldn't put a big garage, you couldn't put an addition. You know, a lot of lots in town are, you know, small. So that provision would allow the use of, you know, we don't use our right of way. I mean, if you go around Old Town, the pavement ends here and there's a, you know, half of my front yard is technically, not a half, but a third of my front yard is right of way. So we're not, and we don't own our utilities, we don't have, so I just feel like it's an accommodation. It might be for the few, but allows someone on a smaller lot to do more because they are on septic. So, I mean, we're doing a renovation now. I know I'm on public sewer because I know where it is, but I also dug up an old septic system. So, you know, some folks are gonna walk into it not knowing. They, you know what I mean? The county might say public utilities, and that might be the extent of somebody's investigation to see what it is. So I'm not asking to change it today. I'm just thinking as a topic of conversation that
Okay.
it wouldn't be too onerous, I think, on our right of way to put a 4-inch line and allow someone to go fix it if they had to.
Yeah, I see Mike Apke going. So, you know, it's something certainly that we can consider, but probably not solved today.
No, just I wanted to put it out there. We can discuss
Okay.
it at a work session and
Yep.
hear the pros and cons. I'm glad Bruce pointed out that there's an accommodation to do that, but, you know, septic systems, if they fail, you need to have a repair area. If you do new ones today, you have to have a repair area. You're eating up your lot. And I'm not against septic systems at all. I think you should be able to have one, but you lose an awful lot on some of these really small lots in Old Town. And you're seeing more and more people want to do renovations, additions, those kind of things, and you'll be awfully limited. And it would be neat if staff had the opportunity to be creative, if you will, but not, you know, and to play, you know, history, charm, and Southern hospitality. That's all.
History, charm, and so on. Okay, let's put that down for our next work session to get a little bit more information, and have council understand it a little better. Any other business from council?
The reason I wanted to remove the minutes from the May 23rd meeting was and correct me if I'm wrong, I wasn't here, I have not watched the video, I've read a few emails that people sent to me, and there was a discussion about an inexcused absence for me. I did have there's no difference between inexcused and excused. You're either here or you're not here. I don't believe the village has a policy on one or the other. I had my reason for not coming, and it was nobody's business. And I voted apparently in absentia. I voted for something, and that just defies logic. I know what the vote was for those 2 days, and everybody who heard me speak publicly on the issues. Well, one of the matters was closed session, but obviously we were going to vote collectively for that. And with regard to the church, obviously people heard me, the parking's an expansion over there at the Presbyterian Church. We were going to, obviously, I think everybody knew how I'd vote. It's not about the vote, it's about a sort of a discussion, and we can kick it to a work session. I just think I don't think it's good policy to start saying, to take the position that an absent council member is a positive vote. If you had to break a tie and you did it with somebody who wasn't here, on a difficult matter, just not the policy you want to go with. There's no state law one way or the other. The blogs don't go one way or the other. It's a discussion that's fairly convoluted, but I just think from a policy perspective, I don't think any local government, any government should start, you don't have proxies. We're not a homeowners association. If you're here and you don't vote, you don't have a valid legal reason, and there's only a few to not vote on something, then it seems to me you have a quorum and the quorum votes. And if there's a split vote, then you deal with it moving forward. So that's the reason we can approve the minutes at our next meeting. It wasn't about the minutes per se. It was about a discussion of policy moving forward.
Right. The advice that I was given is that if your absence is unexcused, and we really didn't have any additional information, that your vote is in the affirmative, and that seemed the fairest thing to do to any applicants coming. The vote probably was going to be 4-0.
There's no difference
anyway.
between excused and inexcused, and we don't have a policy. So whatever advice you got, that was the decision they wanted to make.
Well, we'll look it over at our next work session, because it was from the Institute of Government, I believe. But it was through our manager. So let's put that on the agenda for our next work
You're
session.
walking in dangerous waters, if you ask me. Because
I understand. I got some advice, and did what the advice suggested.
But you know you're going in and you have a quorum. I just don't, it just doesn't, it's not even a reasonable consideration in my mind to think a non-present person can vote. It just doesn't, it's not a shareholder meeting. It just does, I'm talking, not talking as a council member right now, I'm talking as a citizen who in 4 fast months won't be sitting here any longer.
Yeah.
And I will honestly say, I won't be able to come to every meeting, I won't be able to watch every video. I would like to think that the people present, if you have a quorum, you have your meeting, those people vote.
And from my point of view, I like to get advice from our manager through whatever resources he has, and that's the advice that I had. So that's how we handled it that evening. If you're not excused from voting, your vote is in the affirmative, and you were not excused from voting. I mean, I understand the situation, but
If you, it's definitive if you're here and you're not excused. Definitive. If you don't have one of the three legal reasons to not vote and you're here, your vote is a positive. You sit silently, it's a positive vote. I don't say aye at every vote, but it's always unanimous because I don't have to vote. I don't have to say a word to vote positively. If you're not here, it's a completely different conversation, and there is nothing written anywhere that talks about excused, inexcused. You could get elected and never come.
well, that's another question. But the information I had in writing was different from what you're saying. So let's not litigate that here. I'm not an attorney and you are. But let's talk about that at our next work session because it's important that we do it correctly.
And it's not, it's more about protecting, I just think, the sanctity of this body for citizens that don't come. I just can't see how a person not there can vote. It just
Okay.
defies logic.
We'll look at it at our work session. Does anyone have any other business? I have one thing before, Leo, that you would be under comments from attendees. I have some other business. We have had some issues with our downtown, and I think it would be very prudent for a couple of us, and I'm going to suggest myself and Claire, work with the downtown business partners and find a way to better communicate with them and see what it is they would like to have from us. So it's just really, it's not any big committee, it would just be the two of us, just talking with them and seeing what kind of communication they would like, and we'll report back to the council once we do that. Is that agreeable to you, Claire? Agreeable to everyone?
And just to add, in my 9-to-5 life as
Yes.
with the Tourism Bureau, I've worked with the Pinehurst Business Guild and
Exactly.
Pinehurst Business Partners over the years, so I'm comfortable with that.
I think Claire is the perfect person to do that. So we will do that together. Okay, any other comments from council members? Comments from attendees? Mr. Santoso?
I'd just like to thank the council for what I consider a great opportunity to lead the Planning and Zoning Board for the next few years into what I think is going to be some challenging times. And I hope the toughest job isn't trying to get people to speak into the microphone.
Oh, my God.
Thank you very much.
That's our toughest job, isn't it, Leo? Thank you, Leo. We're very happy that you're agreeing to serve. Any other comments from attendees? John Root? Okay. Your name?
Kathy Spangler, and I'm going to start by telling you that for 30 years I sat on your side. I was a public school administrator, and I've never done this. I've never been on this side. So I also appreciate your time and what you do. What I like to do, and I guess it's just been on my mind, and it's a frustration in my mind that I would ever think that I would come here, because I know what you're thinking. This is almost over, and I want to go home, because I've been there so many times.
We've been here till 8 o'clock sometimes.
But
This is
anyhow,
early.
I would like to address the council and the mayor about our aging infrastructure and a great need that I see in my community. I live off of St. Andrews, which I guess at one time was Unit 1 or Zone 1, and it was the Diamond Head Corporation that put in my streets in 1970s, and as far as I know, they've never been totally resurfaced. I think also Duke Energy has been here and addressed the electric issue in our area. That since we've lived here 5 years, our electric has gone off 2 or 3 times in every year. I have some visual aids. Being the former educator, I have some visual aids of our street. And my street that I'm going to show you just represents 4/10 of a mile. And I'll give the council some other pictures of what happens in those 4/10 of a mile. So the very first picture, I don't know if you guys
Back to the mic or it won't be recorded, Kathy.
I don't know if you guys could see back in here, but the very first picture is really the entrance to my short street. And, you know, I go over this every day in terms of that's kind of how this 4/10 of a mile starts. Then 2, 3, and 4, and I'm not an engineer and I'm not a street person, but obviously one of the things that's happening in all of these streets is the root structure is tearing up the streets. So that if there is going to be any repaving of the total street, that's going to have to be dealt with in this area. And then we just took some other pictures, 5 and 6, but number 7 I want to show you, if that can even be enlarged. That was the latest patch job on our street. And they didn't even totally resurface, that's it right there. That's kind of the latest patch job. And this represents, as I said, 4/10 of a mile in a community that if you would travel in that community, you're going to see those same issues. I'm not here to debate, you know, the community center or things that have been done to make our community some of the things that I consider wants and not needs. I'm not here to debate that. My husband and I would totally support community centers, anything else, but I want my street repaved. You know, and if that can happen and we can still have community centers and things like that, I'm all in favor of it. We're not against that. But I'm tired of driving into my street that looks like this. And I'm tired of my electric going off. So I'm here today to ask you to consider some long-range planning for this infrastructure. That's not going to go away. It's only going to get worse. And if we don't start budgeting for total resurfacing of these streets over the long haul, because in 10 years, there'll be other communities like ours, because mine's one of the oldest. But we have to start planning for this aging infrastructure, and I ask your consideration for that.
Thank you, Kathy. Jeff, would you like to briefly comment on how we do our street resurfacing program?
Yeah, I can try to enlighten a little bit on there without going into too much detail. First of all, we budget about $900,000 a year for street resurfacing. About half of that comes from the Powell bill funds, which is partial distribution through gas tax. When we evaluate streets for resurfacing with that $900,000, as Kathy indicates, repairs are a portion thereof the process. But how we arrive at which streets are to be resurfaced is a whole nother exercise. Every 3 years, we have an independent engineering firm come in and they rate all of the roads. They ride every road in the village of Pinehurst and they rate segments. They don't rate a whole St. Andrews. St. Andrews may be broken down into 8 to 12 different segments. They rate each thing, give it a score from 0 to 100, 100 being a brand new road, 0 being all to pieces. Then village staff takes that report and we start basically at the bottom where the zeros are and we work our way up the list as far as the funds will go. This year we're up into the high 40s, I think, is maybe low 50s as far as the number ranges that we're working in. So at least from the standpoint of how the road segments are derived, there is an engineering basis to that. There are other factors that we do try to consider. Build out on the road is typically a consideration. How much additional building can occur. In some places we have a long stretch of road, but one whole side of it is in wetlands or floodplain and unbuildable. When it comes to these kinds of patches, these patches that you're seeing up here are as a result of utility cuts probably by Moore County Public Utilities in all likelihood. And they are responsible for patching back. They have their own contractor that comes in and does the work. The village also does some patching as well, particularly if we go in and cut routes out along the edge of the roads, and we do have a contractor too that comes in and does the small patch work, but the ones that were represented there are primary as a result of either water leaks or, in this case, is probably sewer or water line installation, I'm guessing, not knowing exactly where that is, but it is, I mean, all these patches are a problem. I mean, I
Right.
don't disagree with her from that standpoint. And,
Absolutely.
but there is, I guess, a method to the madness in terms of how we select the roads that are going to be resurfaced on an annual basis. We just got our pavement reconditioning, our pavement conditioning survey completed in 2016, so we're working off of really fresh data in terms of the roads that are being selected for FY18 resurfacing.
Is there a way to give Kathy what number this section gets, and is there any?
Yeah, there
indication?
is. I would need to get, and we are, you know, honestly, we've already selected the roads for FY18. I could tell you, depending on what your address is and what segments we're doing, it's possible. I can't recall for sure if we've got some St. Andrews on there. I think we do. Okay.
You need to come to the mic or we won't.
While she comes to the microphone, I will say, we track a rolling 5-year average of road resurfacing. So our goal is to try to resurface between 5 and 6 miles a year. We've got 106 miles, so we're on roughly a 20 to 25-year lifeline, or time on all the roads. Now, that doesn't mean all of them are on that same life cycle. Cul-de-sacs may go 30, 35 years. St. Andrews may go 10, 12, 15 years. So, but in general, that's kind of where we land right now. Our road rating, just as an FYI, is 80.2, I think, right now. Part of what we get from the engineering service when they do their evaluation is they give us an average rating across all the road segments. That is average for the state of North Carolina. 80 is the average. So we're kind of right about the average.
Okay, Ms. Spangler?
And I would say, I appreciate that, and I think what I'm asking to the council is to put more money in this budget so that you can do this quicker and to more roads. And I think I go back to, I'm not adversarial, but I am adamant, so you will see me again. I don't give up once I start. And I think what I'm saying also is, I'm in, all the things that are the wants, and I'll bring up the community center again. I have no problem. But if I don't see the infrastructure being taken care of, then I will be back. And I won't be adversarial. I'll be as,
Kathy,
polite to your understanding as I can.
We have some sidewalk money that nobody really wants, so we might be able to use some of that.
Right. I would certainly appreciate that, and I think our neighbors would too. So thank you very much for listening.
Let me just make one more comment about Duke Energy and your power going out. We've had great success contacting David McNeil, who is the head of Duke Energy in our area. And he has, in numerous situations, he has identified a transformer or something that can be repaired so that your power doesn't go out. So I will be happy to report that to him.
Well, and 2 months ago, we bought a generator, so it's never going to go out again.
Okay.
We'll never get to use it. We
Okay.
figured we solved that problem. We have a generator now, so we don't have to do, no problem there. Thank you very much for
Thank
listening
you.
to me.
Thank you.
Related to Duke Energy, I would add real quick, Duke Energy is upgrading service in the area along behind Idlewild, coming off of Highway 211, that whole section through there, and that's been a section that has been a problem with power going out. They're adding some secondary power, and part of that is, a good portion of it is underground, so they can flip back and forth between. So they're adding not only capacity, but they are adding some additional reliability, is at least their goal, as we've been working with them off and on
Right.
as they've moved through some
They
of
are
our
great.
right-of-ways.
They are great partners. They really are. John Root.
Afternoon. I'd like to make a request that the handicap parking, which at this point, the 4 spaces that you have far exceeds what is the requirement, but they're unknown.
Where are you talking about, John?
The
Here?
handicap parking that's
Here
here,
in-
yeah,
here for Village
around this
Hall?
building.
Okay.
It's there, but there isn't anything to tell people where it is.
I see.
There was an effort, I guess, made to do that out in front in the Arch Drive by putting a small sign at the bottom.
Handicap parking in the rear.
Yeah, and if there's a car parked in front of the second one,
Right.
you're out of luck. My suggestion would be to put a sign like the post office, the old post office has, very, very easy to see. It's not going to be blocked. It says handicap parking in the rear. And the next thing is to put a sign out at the end of the driveway to say, this is where you turn. And the last thing is to put, at the end of that drive, put a little sign that says, turn right and then left and come down to this area. Because if you come in the driveway, there's a handicap spot at the end of the building. And I think that was made for an employee or somebody because it's next to an unauthorized door. So
Okay.
if the public were to park in that,
Right.
they'd say, bad place. Let's go down, let's find someplace else. And, come down to this. The other thing I would like to request is that maybe a cut in the semicircle curb at the very center so that a wheelchair or handicapped people can come up into the building and they can be dropped off there and then come into the building. There is a ramp at the very end of it, but in order for a car to come and pick up somebody there, they have to stick out in the road. So, and I think probably the plaque that says, "Welcome to the Village of Pinehurst," probably would have to be moved back. But if that could be taken care of, I would appreciate it.
Okay, we'll certainly take a look at that, John. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from attendees? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. It's 20 till 6. Wow. We get dinner tonight.